Good evening, and welcome to the CPARB meeting. Tonight is Thursday, June 26. We're at the multipurpose room in the Bennington Firehouse. And the first order of business will be to introduce ourselves. So I'm Kate Cost, the current vice chair.
I'm Jessie McFarland, new member.
I'm Vicki Lamprin.
Jeff Vickers.
Lindsay Brilliant.
Lydia Winter.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to our reorganization. And do I have any motions for chair?
I nominate Kate Cost.
I second.
Can I have a second?
I second.
I nominate Vicki Lampron.
Okay. Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. So let's start with myself. So we have two candidates. The first is Kate Cost, that's myself. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? Okay. And so you have to say
No,
something.
nay.
If you could say something.
Can I abstain?
Yes.
Okay.
So I have two.
Wait.
I'm sorry?
I'll oppose.
You'll oppose?
Yeah.
Okay. So we've got 3-3. So we have a tie for that. I don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Pardon me?
Dance party.
Dance off.
Yeah, no. So, okay, well, I guess we'll have a motion then for Vicki to be chair. All in favor?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear what was,
We need a motion for
We-
Vicki to be chair.
we're re-voting?
Well, there's 3-3.
So we need a new motion.
Unless we have the expectation that it's going to stay exactly the same for
Well-
Vicki.
I move Vicki for chair.
Okay. I need a second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Well,
Say aye.
so now,
Hang on a
I
second.
had
Yes,
questions on
sure.
this. So we voted and it was 3-3. And then,
Should we have a discussion, maybe?
well, I just don't know how it works. Do we
Yeah.
then, are you withdrawing and saying you don't want to do it, or are we voting again?
No,
Or-
I guess
don't-
I'm not withdrawing.
Okay, so,
Could we table this until the full board was here to vote?
as
I
a
don't think
vice chair,
so.
can't you fill in as chair, as
Yeah.
vice chair?
I can.
So we could run
But our
tonight
next meeting is not till August.
But you would still fill in as in that position until then?
Until then? What do folks think about that? Let's have some discussion then. What do
Yeah.
people think?
I would feel more comfortable, and I think part of the reason the board is an uneven number is so that we can not have ties. And the fact that we have somebody absent, now we're in this situation, it seems like it would be nice to have everyone here.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's possible at the next meeting. We could be in the same
I
situation.
agree with you about an even
Yeah.
number makes it,
Difficult.
Tough.
So I would need a motion then, because we've
I'll make the
had the
motion.
discussion.
I'll make a motion that we table this until the next meeting in the hopes that all members will be there and we can vote again. And until then, the vice chair will perform the duties of chair.
Of the chair. I don't, in terms of discussion, okay, so
You
I need a second on that
yeah.
motion.
I second the motion.
Okay, so let's open that up for discussion, just because I want to make sure that all of the issues are addressed in that. That would mean that everybody, in a sense, commits as much as they can to being here, so we're not left in August with the same situation, right? And, because this is very unusual to have a tie like this. And so I'm not opposed to it at all in terms of, I just want to make sure that we have sufficient discussion so that we don't catch ourselves, if you will.
Question, will we still be trying to elect a vice chair?
I don't see why not. I don't know, in the past, I've been vice chair for the last, year and a half or so. I don't know in the past how that's been. Jeff, did you have a vice chair?
Yeah, we've always had a chair, a vice chair, and a recorder
Okay.
type person.
Yeah, okay,
Maybe Clark could help.
okay.
Maybe.
Welcome, Clark. We have our first dilemma for you. Aren't you happy with that?
My apologies, I was at a funeral for a friend,
Oh, I'm so sorry.
so I thought I'd be here sooner.
Yeah.
Dilemmas, okay.
Yeah. So here's what the situation that we're in. We have a tie vote for chair, 3 and 3, because one of our continuing members is unable to be here tonight. So given that, we want to know whether or not it's possible to delay this vote on the chair until next time we meet, which is in August.
Oh, I would think that's very reasonable, yeah. Since, unless you folks want to reconsider and re-vote, or if you're 100% decided on what your vote is, I guess we probably have to wait till another person's available, but I would put that in the able hands of the current chair by de facto.
Current vice chair.
Well, vice chair, yeah. No, that's how I would look at it.
Is it appropriate for the two who are nominated to kind of say a few words to kind of help?
We can if you want, though. We have never spoken about a specific position. It's always been in support of the community and in collaboration, or to strengthen collaboration between the community and the police department. So we have it, and I guess I would prefer not to have, because we're not political.
Right.
So not to have whatever that's called, a stand.
stump speech.
No, we don't want to do that. No, no.
But you're both interested in the
Good idea.
role.
Yeah,
You
but,
both.
no. I mean, what do members think about that?
I don't think it is, I mean, to me, it doesn't seem overly political if you speak about your kind of beliefs and what you, maybe why you joined the board and what you want to do. I don't know. I would guess a lot of us joined for the same reasons, though, so it's probably
Yeah.
going to be fairly standard, but I don't know that it's a major issue, to me anyway, I guess, but that's just me.
So would it be, in the spirit of board cohesiveness, would it be more cohesive if I withdraw from chair, the
That would be
nominee?
entirely up to you.
Okay. I was just trying to have a bit of discussion about it.
No. I mean, I think that you have an officer's role. You've seen what both the challenges and opportunities of the chair. Certainly, you've observed them firsthand over the last couple of years. I'm sorry. I'm just saying to Vicki that she's, given her role as secretary, that she certainly has seen the challenges of both her role and the role of the chair. She's demonstrated, the integrity and confidentiality that's needed, and certainly has been in support of this community police department connection that we've had. So a very active member. So that's all I would say. I mean, if she feels that would be helpful, supportive of the work of the board to withdraw her nomination, that's entirely up to her. So I just want to, go ahead.
I'm just wondering if the other members of the board might have a comment about this also. I mean, it seems like tabling, because we've got two new people who don't know how people have functioned.
Yeah.
To come on where it was really clear, here's where we're going, and here's who's doing it would be another thing, but I'm sorry there's 2 months between meetings, but I think you really do both and all have the same goals in mind. So it isn't like suddenly things are going to go awry in the next 2 months.
Yeah, no, I would agree.
In my own opinion, it didn't seem necessary to withdraw her name as a potential chair because you're not voting again.
Okay.
Yeah. Any other discussion? So I'm still kind of left with my own question about your potential withdrawal. Did you want to move on that? We've discussed, we haven't made a motion yet about voting for this delay. Is that correct?
I made a motion.
Oh, you made a motion, it was second. Okay, so,
Withdraw that.
okay. So what say you?
So what say me? First and foremost, as I said, it's cohesiveness of the board that I want to keep. We've worked very well together over the past years. I would prefer that we wait until August, when there's a full board.
Sure. Sure, let's do that.
That way it's a clear.
Okay, okay. So, Robert's Rules of Orders, I don't think even has an idea about how to deal with this. So, I guess, can you bring back your motion?
Yeah, I didn't withdraw it. I said I could.
You could, so you didn't withdraw. Okay, all in favor then of delaying the vote for chair until our August meeting, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the motion passes then. All right, thank you. So let's read the vision statement.
Bennington is a welcoming, engaged, inclusive, and resilient community where everyone, regardless of identity, shares in our vitality and benefits from an outstanding quality of life.
Thank you. Can we have the consent of the agenda? A motion to
Make a
accept.
motion, we accept it.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, none, and abstentions? None? Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the previous meeting's minutes?
I'll make a motion, we accept them as written.
Second?
Second.
All in favor? Say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstentions? So we have 2 abstentions. All right, thank you. Public comment?
My name is, I can do without it.
You just say your name?
Yeah, my name is Lonnie Chu.
And Bennington.
I live on County Street in Bennington. And I brought this subject up at one of the more recent Select Board meetings. And in an attempt to keep it under 3 minutes, I've written it out. A complex and troubling situation arises when individuals impersonate ICE officers or when ICE itself is perceived to act outside due process. If this were to happen in Bennington, our police officers would sadly be caught between their obligations to enforce the law, protect community members, and navigate federal immigration enforcement policies. Some police departments have implemented training aimed at protecting residents from illegal detentions, including those by ICE impersonators. For example, the Los Angeles Police Department has issued guidance and conducted trainings on how officers should respond to immigration enforcement activity and impersonators. They emphasize that officers should not assist with immigration enforcement unless legally required and should protect residents from fraud or impersonation. The New York Police Department, through its Office of Immigrant Affairs, has conducted trainings for officers on recognizing fraudulent ICE activity and protecting residents from unlawful detentions or scams by ICE impersonators. The Chicago Police Department offers guidance to officers on the city's welcoming city ordinance, which limits cooperation with immigration enforcement and trains officers to identify and respond to unlawful detentions or impersonations. What's in these trainings? How to verify the identity of federal agents, how to recognize fraudulent badges, paperwork, or uniforms, legal boundaries of federal versus local authority, protecting civil rights and avoiding complicity in unlawful detentions, and community trust-building strategies. I'd like to suggest that Bennington create an ordinance that ensures legal backing for officer refusal procedures and mandatory training. Also, I'd ask that Bennington avail itself of existing training materials as used in the cities that I've mentioned. I personally would be happy to do further research if requested. Thank you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, Madam Vice Chairman, if I may speak here, please. As a member of the Select Board, I specifically addressed concerns of the immigrant community with the Chief of Police, and reinforced by a comment from the town manager specifically stating the Bennington Police Department will in no way be involved with enforcement or application of federal immigration laws. Now, absent, on a different level, should a member of the immigrant community be involved in serious criminality, the Bennington Police Department, through their chief, have stated they will enforce the laws of Vermont as applicable for the accused. Now, in terms of routine traffic infractions or civil events, the chief of police specifically said that is not an issue that the Bennington Police would be bringing to the attention of any federal enforcement entity. I do not remember any specific discussion of imposters, but again, using the chief's words, should there be someone in this town pretending to be a law enforcement agent at any level, state, local, federal, I do believe that in itself is a crime that our police department would be willing to act upon with that actor. But as it stands now, and again, the town manager and the chief of police have reiterated this, the Bennington Police Department will not participate in the enforcement of federal immigration laws, but they will enforce the laws of the state of Vermont, regardless of who the offender may be. I hope that gives you some answer.
Thank you. Did you want to say something?
I do hear what you're saying about impersonators, and that training needs to probably modify and modernize as things in our environment and around this country are changing.
I have another comment. This is from Kelly Carroll that was posted on our comment section of our website. And given past precedent at both the Select Board level and CPARB, I'm going to read her statement into the record. Okay. Good evening. My name is Kelly Carroll. Last month, I was informed that I was not reappointed to the Community Policing Advisory Review Board. And while I am disappointed by this outcome, I am not surprised. I believe it was a political retaliation, but I remain committed to public service and to the core values I brought to CPARB: transparency, accountability, and meaningful collaboration with our police department. I believe deeply in the principles of community policing and the importance importance of building trust between the community and law enforcement. That is why CPARB was established, and that mission remains vital. I encourage the current board members to stay focused on that work. Do not be discouraged by political maneuvering, and do not allow the board to be used as a tool to carry out hidden agendas. Bennington's vision statement calls for a welcoming, engaged, inclusive, and resilient community where everyone, regardless of identity, shares in our vitality and benefits from an outstanding quality of life. That vision must also include our law enforcement officers and the many residents who support them, ensuring they too feel respected, heard, and valued within our community. It is no secret that some members of the Charter Committee have advocated for disbanding CPARB. More troubling, during a Select Board meeting in January, the chair of the Charter Committee and current Select Board member publicly claimed that every member of CPARB told her the board should be disbanded. That statement was false. Some would even say it's a lie. She never spoke to at least 4 members of the board, and the 2 members she did speak with did not express that sentiment. This was a serious misrepresentation. If there is interest in disbanding CPARB, that conversation should have taken place openly and transparently, not behind closed doors and not under the guise of, quote, personnel in executive session. I want to thank the 2022 Select Board for giving me the opportunity to serve. This was my first time on any municipal board, and it was a truly meaningful experience. I also want to express my gratitude to the CPARB members I had the pleasure to serve with, to the Bennington Police Department, and to the many community members and organizations who welcomed CPARB during our listening sessions. That outreach made a difference, and I hope it continues. To my fellow Bennington residents, please don't let recent events discourage you from getting involved in local government. Your voice matters, but let's all commit to a higher standard of conduct. The disruptive behaviors we've seen in recent meetings, talking over others, storming out mid-meeting, eye-rolling, and frequent interruptions, undermine public confidence and discourage participation. We can and should do better. Although I no longer have a seat on CPARB, I will continue to advocate for open, inclusive, and respectful governance. I will continue to support community policing initiatives and transparent collaboration with the Bennington Police Department. Argumentative, adversarial, and confrontational approaches have no place in Bennington, not on CPARB, and not on the Select Board. Thank you to everyone who stood with me and supported me during my service. I remain grateful for the opportunity to contribute to our community. Sincerely, Kelly Carroll, Bennington resident. Okay. Anyone else want to say anything? Does anyone else have any comments? Okay, thank you. That's the end of that portion of our agenda. The next item on the agenda is a BPD update. Chief Paul Doucette and Lieutenant Grandy are unavailable. I will say that they've been very busy interviewing folks for promotions and recruitment, as we are down 8 officers right now. So that's the update. There's no questions on that? Okay. The next item on our agenda is community policing, and this is our annual review of procedures and their consistency with the revised CPARB resolution. I've also distributed a copy of the community policing principles that we use to inform not just the resolution, but also a lot of our actions in terms of the listening sessions, et cetera, that we've had. Unfortunately, they're in blue, and that's only because I don't have black ink. So let's open that up for review.
I have a question.
Yes, sure.
The agenda article talks about review of procedures. It doesn't mention policies. Is it?
It's because we have this review board practices. So our policy is actually the resolution. That's what guides us. That's our goals in
Okay.
there. I'm sorry.
I get it.
go ahead.
I
Okay.
thought we were talking about police procedures.
Oh, no, no.
This is CPARB procedures.
This is CPAR procedures.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So.
I've used up one of my dumb questions.
Oh, no, these are not dumb questions, they're clarifying questions, so I appreciate that. Okay, would anybody like to start us off? Continuing members, maybe, because you're probably much more familiar with this. So there's an agreement on the member engagement. This is adherence to public meeting law, and all established policies and protocols and communication with town officers. So very often, our communication with Select Board is obviously through our liaison, and very often, the chair of the board, with questions for town officers, will email Stu Hurd with a CC to Dan Monks, who are our primary contact. Though we do have contact with, I'm sorry, I keep turning away toward us, though. We do have contact with the human resources folks at the town, and with Meryl Bent, who is the counselor for the town. So when we have legal questions, we'll contact them directly. Usually that's through the chair and vice chair. Okay. Any questions on that one? So that's not so much the resolution, because that just supports some of that, but there's not a lot of procedure in the resolution. There's more policy, and then our goals and activities with that, okay? So no questions on that? Okay. Willingness to actively participate in identified tasks, projects, and/or activities. That's a practice that we have that helps implement the goals and activities of the resolution. Any questions on that one? Okay. And then responsive to chair requests. Sometimes in the past, members have not always responded through email because we have to use the Bennington town email, and people don't, it's sometimes hard to get used to using that. But that's the one we use rather than our personal accounts. Okay? But we do not have an option to respond to all. So the chair may send out something, or an individual member may send out something initially to everybody, but you cannot respond all, because that's a violation of open meeting law. Okay? It's a quirk of that law. All right. Any questions on that?
So that means you only respond directly to the person, or do you CC other individuals?
You don't CC anybody else.
Okay.
I shouldn't say that. You can CC probably one other, but we want to adhere to open meeting law. And so, Clark, you have a comment?
I just want to clarify.
Sure.
I hear from Stu Hurd weekly on this. Your responses cannot equate to a quorum.
You're correct.
So there's 7 of you, so you may respond, in my mind,
In
to
3.
the originator and 2 other individuals.
Correct.
Correction. That would make 4. No more than 2 others.
Yeah, no more than 2.
So you cannot have more than 4 people.
Yeah, that also applies to conversation.
Yeah.
So conversation in regards to board matters cannot be in a group of more than 3.
Right.
I think when we do the listening sessions, we tend to
Yeah, we don't.
have it less than.
Yeah,
as well.
in fact, more often than not, for our listening sessions, we only have 1 to 2 people, because we want to make sure there's confidentiality, but we don't want to breach this quorum issue and open meeting law.
That's part of the training as
Yes.
well, is they'll go through all of
There, you'll go through all of
Yeah.
that in terms of training. Okay. Any questions about that? Okay, so we've got so this is the part that we'll need the resolution for, because the yearly review of CPARP goals and activities come under that, okay? So if you turn to, well, the first page, you've got some goals. So recommend policy department, police department, and CPARP trainings and community collaboration efforts. So one of the things that happened when we were in the process of reviewing this and then presenting it to the select board on the 27th of January was to include a commitment to review current training, but also add others. So the two that were added in particular, so we have to, on page 3, you'll see there's an item on training. And it says in the third line, that we're, third and fourth line, that we provide a list of trainings for members of CPARP on a yearly basis, okay? And the two trainings that were added this year were implicit bias, that we will do an on-site training with the officers, because we have to bring somebody in for that. And so that'll be combined when the police department has their on-site training for implicit bias. We'll participate in that one, because that will help reduce the cost, rather than to bring in a presenter twice, okay? The other item that was added to that was observation of their use of force. And they will have that training. I don't know that that will be in town. It may be just outside town, because they need a big area for that. And then we will observe that. Clark.
One suggestion, completely off the subject. Could you bring your mic much closer to you, because you have a tendency to turn and speak away, so if you could bring that in much closer to you.
As long as I don't bump my nose.
Yeah, I just want to make sure Cat TV can hear.
Sure,
hear what
thank
you're
you.
saying, that's all.
Thank you, appreciate that. Okay, so those two items were added in terms of training, but in terms of the goals, and I hope I didn't lose that. Okay. Yeah, too many pieces of paper. Okay, so the review and make recommendations to propose an existing police department policies and procedures. We have looked at those and gotten a copy in the past about all the trainings that they've received and their policies and how they're approaching. So we need to do that again this coming year, and because we have done it in each of the last 2 years.
Question?
Any thoughts on that?
Please.
Oh, yes.
It's my understanding that the police department is required to submit an annual report to the Criminal Justice Council summarizing the training that's been done during the year. Would it be just simpler if we requested the police department to share the same report that they gave to the Criminal Justice Council with us?
Sure, I can talk to Paul about that.
I think there's something in here about that, if it's requested. BPD training information include name of training, date, number, and rank of attendees, location, in-house or consultant-led, state or federally mandated, BPD required or optional. So that's on a specified or as-needed basis they provide it, so we can request that.
Yes,
for
sure.
that, yeah.
Also, and this is where I guess I can put in my 2 cents about procedures versus policies. The resolution updated in January specifically says we should consult with the police on policies and procedures. Policies can be looked at on the Bennington website. How do we get to see procedures?
My understanding is that some of it is through our observation and direct contact with officers. So we see that in action those procedures in action. I will have to ask Paul if he has anything written, on procedures itself.
It's just hard for us to
Sure.
work with them on procedures if we
Sure.
can't see them.
Okay. I know they have them, because we've discussed certain procedures. I don't know if we've seen the whole report on that. That I don't.
Thank
I don't
you.
recall seeing a report.
Thank you.
So I'm just making notes on myself. Okay. Analyze town-wide safety data with a focus on equity and areas of need. A couple of meetings ago, we presented the 2023 data, which was the most recent. We have tables on that from a couple of meetings ago. There's another table in your packet that was requested by Clark, actually, to our previous chair. So that's in your packet. And so I've got the so what we have from the safety data is that we've analyzed is we've got the by sex, by race, and by age. So the number of stops, because this is safety data, and it's from the state. So it's always a year late, and it doesn't include information on residents. The state doesn't collect information on residents. So we don't know where people live, or all we know is live currently, what state or town they live in, or and also, so there's no way to record that, all right? What we do know is where they were stopped, and the exact time to a point of 0.1 seconds. So we have, in terms of time, which mean nothing to us. And where they stopped, there's no way to see, at our level of analysis, there's no way to see whether or not there's a trend about where they're stopped, because there's no consistency in that, okay? Just so that you have a sense of that. And it's, we won't go there. So utilize state and national data to understand local trends as appropriate. So we've not had access. We have the state safety data for the town. We've not ever been able to get the state and national data on local trends as appropriate. We've never been able to do that. And the board itself, because we have no funding, we don't have sufficient resources to try to get that at the level that we would need to know our local trend and how we compare to other communities. And so that's always been a tricky one. We keep trying, which is why it's still there, but we've not been able to achieve that. Foster collaborative efforts within the community that is conducive to hear all voices. I'll save that for when we get into our activities. And then work with the select board and town staff, including the BPD, to promote learning on community safety and equity issues. Any questions on the goals? It seems that so we're, in terms of review, I'd like you to move to activities then. Review required training for the BPD. That's where we worked with last year in the past several months, 6 months, maybe more, with the chief to identify further training needs. And so I will mention that it would be helpful to have some more training on ICE and what we can and cannot do, so I'll mention that. Kelly and I had meetings with the chief every month just to keep track of what's going on in the department and whether or not we need to have a special session here, and there hasn't been cause for that. Yet he has spoken both here and to the Select Board about their approach to ICE, which Clark already mentioned, but I will also mention that to him in terms of concerns from this comment.
Kate, can
Yes.
I just make a comment?
Sure.
If we are going to suggest that there's specific training around ICE, I think that we should revisit the police's procedure around interpretation. I know that was something that I had brought up earlier, and I was told that they use, if I'm mistaken, please someone correct me, Google Translate. So I just would like to make a note of that, and perhaps that should be addressed as well.
Sure. Yes, of individuals whose English is not their first language. It's important to have, for them to have access to someone who is fluent, because Google Translate only goes so far. So, Lydia, did you want to make a comment? I saw you raise your hand.
No, I'm just
Okay,
fine.
good.
Thank
All
you. I'm
right.
fidgeting.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Any comments on any of that? Okay, so the other activity is to review existing collaborations with local organizations, agencies, and make recommendations on ways to strengthen and to develop additional working relationships between BPD and the community. We've at multiple meetings and conversations with the police department. We've talked to them about the collaborations that they have with UCS and Turning Point and the rescue squad and the emergency room, and how to make those connections and collaborations easier to access. So far, what they've been doing seems to be working well. They have a dedicated officer for child abuse investigations and through the Child Advocacy Center, I believe. So any comments or questions about that? Any comments or questions about that? Sorry, Taurus.
Do you know if they have, is there data that shows a trend that towards success?
We don't currently have an analyst at the department. In the recent town budget, it was approved that someone be hired to analyze that, but given that we're 8 officers down, that has not been a priority to do that.
That information might come from the agencies that they partner with. The agency that I'm employed with has a partnership with the police department, and we collect our own data on that. So it might be something that, if we were interested in looking at that, we could reach out to UCS, Turning Point, et cetera.
All right, thank you. And then review anonymized compliments and complaints. I'm not sure I said that correctly, that word. Is that how you say anonymized? Anyway, it doesn't matter. Anonymized, okay. Compliments and complaints to be utilized by the CPARB for the purposes of identifying problems, patterns, and positive actions. We've only had four complaints in the past year, so there's not enough really there to tell us any trends. Nor are there any, other than the community is really happy. We've learned this through our listening sessions. The community is really happy and grateful for the neighborhood walkarounds that we've been able to do, though that's been difficult to maintain when this summer as things begin to act up. We actively engage individuals and organizations in the community to encourage and support a culture of inclusion, trust, and accountability through the use of listening sessions, attendance at community events, and other relevant activities consistent with the goals of CPARB and this resolution as authorized by law. As I mentioned, we've had 8 listening sessions last year. In February, we had an educational forum on public safety efforts. And in November, we plan to have, requested by the community and the panelists, the members that were attended this forum, that we have one on current sentencing practices to address the concerns the community has had on the revolving door through the courts, and why is that occurring. And both the legislature, I shouldn't say the legislature, the folks that were on the panelists, the town's, what's her, Erica, what's her, State's Attorney, and others that were on that panel suggested that we have sentencing there so that we could get into the specifics of that. The providing annual summary of CPARB activities, that was submitted in December, and another one will be submitted to the town to be included in their town report this December. And then obtain a update on community-based safety initiatives from relevant parties. We've begun in our agenda to talk about individuals, members' attendance at Project Alliance and at Beans and Bagels, that gets information from businesses. And they each, I believe they meet every other month. So in July, there's one, Beans and Bagels is on the 10th of July, and a Project Alliance is on the, I think the 15th or 14th of July. I'll be attending those, and then reporting back in August. Okay, as those go. Okay, any questions about the activities? Okay.
Well, I just, again, if I could.
Sure.
This document that's called Community Policing Advisory Review Board Practices really is redundant with the resolution. I mean, this just recaps the goals and activities that the resolution of January provided for us.
Well, that's that one item. The other item, though, is on intended impact. So we try to look at our intended impact, the structure and practices, and then the annual summary. So just to, it's more about a checklist in terms of have we done these things? Because we've not, the first year, some of these didn't occur because we were just in a state of organizing. The second year we began to really, because you have to think about, we didn't start until March 22. And so March so half the year, two-thirds of the year is gone. So people are still finding their feet, right? And how to proceed. And so this was just almost like a checklist. Have we looked at these things? Are we paying attention to these things? Have we gotten off track? We don't want to get off track. So in a sense, that's what this does. The practices that this, and it also helps us to make sure that are we as individual members responding? Are we participating? Because that's a check on our own behavior. And obviously people's lives get really busy. So for example, with some of the listening sessions, many folks are working. And so they can't do the ones that are during the day. And when we meet with seniors at the senior center, it's got to be at a specific time, otherwise they aren't there, right? And that's during the day before lunch. When we talk to the youth at CRJ, it's during their drop-in session, so that's a specific time, and it's right after school. So if you're working a 9-to-5 job, or more than that, it gets to be hard to organize ourselves to do that. So this is just sort of a check on ourselves, but we want to make sure that we're consistent with our resolution, and that's the biggest part of it, because activities can, as we all know, because we're involved in things, they can go off track sometimes, and so that's a check on ourselves. Is that helpful? Sort of?
Well, I think you're trying to do two things here. you're trying to recap the goals and activities as contained in the resolution, and then you're sort of adding little reporting on, yeah, this is how we're doing this.
Well, and also, it's not clear to me, the CPARB's report was submitted in December as a part of the town's report. I don't know how many members actually read the town's yearly report. And so by including that as I go through the practices and the goals and activities, it helps us know that we're in sync with that what we're doing, we are, in fact. We have actions and activities that have supported those.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So intended impact. I'd like to hear from somebody who has seen our intended impact. We know that they're consistent with the board charge in terms of the resolution. But there's the select board values, et cetera, that are there. Anybody? Would anybody like to comment on that?
I think you're saying yearly goals
Yeah.
are in line, and I think, like last year or this year, talking about the listening sessions and things like that, where how we put into practice what we read as the goals of CPARB as part of the resolution, that's how we put that into practice in one way, yeah.
It's a pretty specific goal in the resolution to promote learning and to create a community that is conducive to hear all voices. So I think the impact really is the listening sessions and the fact that while they might not have been highly attended, each one had some participants and that the feedback was consistent at each listening session. I think we did notice patterns. So I think that definitely shows an impact on that goal.
Others? No, I was thinking that one of the goals here was to work with select board and town staff, including BPD, this is on the first page, to promote learning on community safety and equity issues. So that comes through in some of our educational forums and the one that we've got planned to make sure that all people are treated equally and in that respect and equity. Any other comments on that? The second was about select board values. Obviously, we adhere to the town mission in terms of inclusivity. We have had, that comes through with the listening sessions. And will again come through with this next educational forum on sentencing that we've invited providers of services to talk about the impact that the sentencing has on them, their role in sentencing, like the Center for Restorative Justice and what they do for the community. Okay. Anything else on that?
We're going to talk about, later in the agenda, we're going to talk about the listening session.
Yeah. And because we want to broaden the number, if it's possible, and certainly the populations that the groups in different parts of the Bennington community that we've not had the opportunity yet to talk to. So identify and agree on tasks, projects, or activities that further goals consistent with the principles of community policing. What struck me or prompted me to bring this document on. And so I wondered if, as you're thinking, we've already got a listening session set up at the emergency room at the hospital here in town to talk to staff there. We're in the process of planning one at the high school and middle school with the kids there. And so we'll be asking about other listening sessions, but that will be later in the agenda. We've got the sentencing educational forum set for November. And I wondered if there was anything else that you could think of that we might do. Obviously, we are all able individually to go to the different festivals and things that happen in town to represent ourselves and to talk to people individually on that, with that. But I wondered if there was anything else that people thought that maybe we could do.
I'm confused. Are we at that item in the agenda?
No,
or are we
we're
looking
just
forward to that?
We have to identify and agree on tasks, projects, or activities that further the goals. So we just want to make sure that if there is something else that we could add to that list of things that we do, that would be great. If not, if we think that is what we can manage in the next year, because we've never talked about, like, what else can we do besides educational forums and listening sessions? So I'm just wondering.
I do think that we had brought up that we had not been able to compare data from other towns to our town.
Okay.
If that's possible, possibly the Department of Health had done some community violence prevention data. I don't know if that would be relevant, but it might be something that we would like to review and compare our county to other counties.
Sure.
That could fall under this, and it could be a different task.
Yeah. I could also ask the chief whether or not we could get access to safety data from other towns to see whether or not there's big differences or any difference between age, sex, and race for those that traffic safety data.
And some of that data has to be readily available because it is what informed the creation of Project Alliance.
Sure. Okay. Anything else? Oh, Tortoise.
I remember early on that you were concerned that few people knew what CPARB did or was, and that you had 2 or 3 questions that you were going to go to the listening sessions.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if by now, what kind of evidence you have that the role of CPARB and what you do is better understood.
From the analysis that we did on those listening sessions, by and large, people had no clue what we did. And they left those listening sessions better informed, but we found out from the forum this past February that they really still didn't understand CPARB's role or what we did. So
Word of mouth is a way that, so I'm just wondering what is going on, whether the people who had a better understanding of you when you listened to them, then could go on and let other people know. Because this is what you're trying to do,
correct.
To collaborate together, be a team, and the evaluation of how it's going, and if you have to do something different.
Yeah, that's, I guess, and your point is a really good one, because when I go to Beans and Bagels, and when I've gone to Project Alliance, the providers and the commercial sector of town, seem to understand what we do and appreciate what we do, ask questions, but it's the residents themselves who does.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And might as well get my 2 cents in that when Chief Doucette reports, you really do need to find out how what they're doing is having an impact on the residents.
Sure.
Because so much of his report is the training that they're getting and how that's being received,
Yeah.
and the dogs
Sure.
More than the people.
Yeah, no, it's true, very true.
I think,
Thank
too,
you.
comparing answers that we get at these listening sessions to the answers that we got at the last listening session might give us some insight into that. You know, are people seeming to be more informed about the role of CPARB at these current listening sessions than they were at the ones we had last year? But I think that's a really good point.
Thank you, thank you. Okay. And then actively engage members of the community and BPD to achieve goals whenever appropriate. So that's been the efforts with the Beans and Bagels group and the and Project Alliance to link with them and collaborate with them on activities. Okay. Okay, yearly review of CPARB structure and practices, articulate officers' duties and responsibilities, and planning is consistent with board charge and the principles of community policing. Are there things that you would like to change, add to the CPARB officers' duties and responsibilities? Is there anything that... I know that we got 2 new members, so you're in the dark here unless you've watched a lot of our meetings. But I wondered if continuing members had things that they would like to see happen in the next year in terms of officers' duties and responsibilities, or the planning.
I think it's been working well.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Vicki, anything? No? Okay. And then the annual summary was presented to the board, select board, so that's been done. In the past, that's been, it was unclear as to who received that and when to submit that. And that's now been clarified in the resolution. Okay. Any other thoughts on how we're implementing or adhering to the resolution? No? Okay. So then we'll move to the CPARB update. We should all be doing, or if you've already done it, the municipal code, the Vermont's Municipal Code of Ethics. So just suggest, is anybody having any trouble with that program? No? Okay. And then I was able to participate in panel interviews for BPD officer promotions. Each of the 9 officers who were seeking promotion submitted their intent to be promoted, and they had to, there were several different types of interviews that I did not participate in because I was out of town, but I was able to participate in their presentations. Some of them were really very, very cool, but these were for positions for advancement to corporal and to sergeant at both the night shift and the day shift. You could recall that these shifts are 12 hours long, so they go from 5 to 5, 5 a.m. to 5 p.m., and then again. So, and then training for all members. I just wanted to make that clear. We have to have a 2-year redo on some of our training. So I don't think that involves another fingerprinting, but it does involve another observation of communication. Not sure that includes, because I haven't had a chance to talk to the chief specifically about what elements of that will need to occur every 2 years. The open meeting law, as far as I know, hasn't changed, but that may be included in this 2-year cycle, because that's a new element that I believe what is it, the police council, I'm blanking out on the name of the full council, but that they will be, they're the ones that specify what has to be every 2 years on that. And then there'll be obviously other training for new members in terms of where evidence is kept and that kind of stuff. Okay?
Just something you and I chatted about earlier, it would be good if we all, to the extent possible, receive the training together.
Yes.
It's more efficient in terms of usage of the police trainer's time. It gives us a chance to hear each other's questions and concerns, and maybe, it's cost-effective, it's time-effective, and it strengthens the team. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
possible.
I mean, I know that Vicki and I and Lindsay all came out at the same time, so whenever possible, Kelly was also a part of that. I think that was a year you were traveling a lot, Jeff, so very often you weren't there, but I know that a previous member was there a lot, so. And Scott came on by himself, so there wasn't that need, because we were still not 2 years out, so. Okay, but I'll pass, because that's usually how it's done, is we all do this together. And then whenever the training can be connected to a current training that officers are having, that's also a part of that, whenever that can happen. Okay, if there's no questions about that, then let's move to the listening sessions. Okay, as you can see here, we have one set for next Tuesday at 2 p.m. Scott Frost and I are going to do that. We have a listening session that we are in the process of planning for next fall with the high school students from ACT and Choices at the middle school. These are two programs that just did a presentation at the select board, and Kelly and I had gone to their open house and were really impressed by the ideas and as well as the approach the kids took to taking care of their community and opportunities to safeguard that community. And working with the police department was a part of all of that. So we asked if we could do a listening session with those two groups to help us dive into those more. Okay? And I wondered if people had suggestions about other groups that we could reach out to. We've tried to get, the only one that we've not really been able to successfully set anything up with has been Queer Connect. We continue to try to set something up. I know they're really busy, particularly in the summer, with different activities. So we'll continue to try to do that. But I wondered if there were other groups that we might be able to reach out to.
Has there been one at the multicultural?
We've done one
You've
with
done
them.
one, okay.
Yeah, and I stopped in to see them, I would say last month, early in May, just to check in to see if they if they needed anything from us, and if they were open to talking to us again. And when I talked to Jack, he suggested that they would like to speak with the chief, and so the chief and I have talked about that, but that's a reach out from Jack, because I know he's also very, very busy right now. But he knows that we're interested in talking with him and his staff, and if his, for want of a better term, I'm going to call them clients, though I wouldn't really say that. Yeah, it's hard to know. But anyway, so the families he works with, I like that better. So he knows that we're interested if he has any need to talk to us again. But I wondered if there were other groups or organizations.
I'm not sure the logistics of this, but it would be interesting if we could somehow get the local hotel owners that participate with ESD together and see if we could have a listening session with their experience with the police and police response.
Sure.
I don't know how that would happen.
Yeah.
I'm going to say that that's
Yeah.
probably a big lift, but it would be interesting.
Yeah, because, I'm gone this coming week, but after that, I'll talk to Jeannie Mintrone, who is head of BBC, and see if she knows of someone who could be the contact for that group. Because maybe they have an organization like BBC.
Yeah, but just thinking that from the reports that we've heard from Chief Doucette, it seems like that is an area that they're called for service to frequently,
Yeah, yeah.
or areas.
Yes, Tortoise.
I don't know if you thought of CCV.
Now, what is CCV?
These are people
The community college?
I'm sorry. Okay.
who did not go through the regular.
Right,
So
right.
you might hear a different bunch of people that way.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Also, besides BBC, Matt Harrington and the
Yes.
Chamber of Commerce.
Did we do one with the Chamber of Commerce?
He
It was a suggestion before, yeah.
It was a suggestion, and I know that he was there the first time Jeff and I met with BBC. I think, anyway. That's a memory trace. But I can reach out to him as well, since...
Because Matt might be a way to get to the hotel people.
Okay. All right, thank you. Are there any other suggestions?
Well, I was thinking, as when Tortoise brought up CCV, did we reach out to Bennington College?
No, we did not. And they're, no, we never did. I don't know that we had a contact person for them. I keep trying to make sure that,
All the international students at
Yeah.
the college that
would certainly be a concern. Yeah. Okay. Sounds good. I'll do that.
I mean, I'll keep suggesting trying to repair the relationship with the NAACP chapter.
Yeah,
And
that would be really lovely if we could
we'll
do
keep
that.
suggesting that.
Yeah. Okay. So this is all that. Anything else on that? I'm just looking for the questions that we had. Oh, thank you. This is the end of
I do have a question.
Sure.
Is it this board's practice when two of us go out to meet some part of the community?
Sure.
For those people to come back and provide some
Yes.
kind of written report
Well,
to
go ahead.
the entire board?
We haven't had a written report, we've had an oral report, and we have had a listing of every organization with the comments that were made, that were part of a meeting packet. And then each member would raise questions or comments on that, but no formal report.
So we are documenting.
Yeah, so we are
these
documenting.
sessions.
We, when we go out to meet with the members of the community in some capacity, it's completely anonymous. We don't take anybody's name. We only report the organization that we went to. And then we just have a list of comments that we've each written down. But we make it very explicit that there's no video, there's no recording, we don't need to know anybody's name. So we try to make it as anonymous as we possibly can with everybody, so folks feel safe. That's really important in terms of some of the things that they've shared about their experiences with the police department. If new members are interested in that, I can certainly send you that document. It's, to go through the packets for individual meetings is too much.
And then we followed up and presented those recommendations to Chief Doucette as well.
Yeah, we have. And he's been present for a lot of the discussions that we've had. At that time, we were meeting monthly. When we did have a listening session, we would bring back just some feedback about how it went and what we as members learned from that. But let me know if you want me to send that to you. Lydia, do you want me to send that to you?
If it's available in an easily sendable form.
Oh, yeah,
that would
no,
be great.
it's on my computer.
All right, thank you.
So,
I'd love that too, thank you.
okay, sure. Okay. We want to go over the questions for the listening session. These were the ones that we used last year, and so I want to just go over those and make sure that we want to keep those or we want to revise them. Okay, so I don't know if you have had a chance to look those over. Did you want me to read them, or what's your pleasure? None? Okay, then I will, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I'm good with them.
Okay. Oh, so you're fine with the ones that we have? Would anybody like to add or change any of these?
I think we should keep them the same if we're trying to measure any type of impact.
Okay.
Yeah, consistency.
Yeah, for the consistency of it, as Vicki said. Okay, then these are a go then. Okay. All right. The next item is the traffic safety data that was, that we had requested. So on page 1, you've got some basic statistics. The total number of cases was 2,718. I should note that this is from January to December 2023. The data are always a year late. So we will get them in a few months for 2024. So the average age was 40 years old. The age range was 14 to 94 years of age. The proportion of male were 61%, and the proportion that were white were 93%. So the first 3 tables goes through sex by driver age, driver sex by driver race, and then driver age by driver race. So you've seen this table before, but it did not include a race, okay? And so we wanted to include that.
Kate, did we ask last year how they're identifying race? It was officer report, right?
Actually, it was
or was
on
it the
the
license?
license.
Yeah.
It's on the
Okay.
license.
I just wanted that clarification.
Yeah. The other thing that, just to clarify, because you'll notice this in let's see, I think it's table 3, where you've got, no, that's driver age. There's driver sex. You've got female, male, and other. And it's because there were 3 individuals who must have come from a state where there was a third option. And so they could say other, or they might have said lesbian, or they might have said LGBTQ+. And so I had to lump them, because there's only 3 of them. And that's state-specific to where they were, because they had that option. So just as a point of clarification with that. So there are probably not anymore because of the executive order from President Trump, but prior to him being in office, states were allowing a third option. Okay, just as a point of clarification for that. So the driver's sex by driver age, and you've seen before. Did anybody have any questions? I guess we decided, sorry for interrupting myself, but we had decided that I use, because these were each individual, and rather than to see each age, we categorize them. That would make sense in terms of both maturity level or just made sense, right? So we had 14 to 29. I tried to, who knows if that's a correct category. Scott Frost had questioned that one, but I wasn't going to go 14 to 25, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, I only wanted to have 4 because it made more sense. And since nobody had objected to that, that's what we did. So as you can see, there were actually quite a number of folks who were 14 to 29. We had made the comment that very often is maturity level, experience with driving, et cetera, and then the 70-plus years, okay? Driver sex by driver race. These were the categories that the state collects. So there was no issues, no choices on my part for that. We had very few, it's Vermont, so there's a larger proportion of white folks than other people. Black, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, there was no other category that was available. So we weren't able to distinguish any of that further. If you have questions on any of this, just let me know. I mean, I
Last year, I
did
deep dived into this last year
Yeah.
and took the percentage, the racial breakdown of Bennington and the percentage and compared it, and it was pretty on par.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
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 This data, the raw data, is available for anyone to look at.
Yes, except it is by month.
Okay.
It's on the town website because by month is how the police department receives it. I have to collapse all of those and put them into a database that has every year. Okay? And when we did this analysis, we decided that we weren't going to worry about time and we weren't going to worry about place that they were stopped, the location that they were stopped. That was a dive that we just didn't feel would inform what we're doing.
What are we going to do with this data?
What did it tell us? It didn't, I think our general perception, and forgive me if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong, was that we didn't find anything surprising, except that there was a 14-year-old and a 93-year-old who were still driving, and that they hadn't crashed. There was something else that they were doing.
I think for me, it was to review the data to see if there are any indications of that wouldn't fit with the expectation of impartial traffic stops, that there was some sign of bias, and I think by looking at it, that allows us to make that determination. That was my take on it anyway, is that it was really to see if there was anything that jumped out as
Pardon me?
a concern.
Your microphone, I can't.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, my main thing is just to see if there's anything that jumped out as out of what you would expect based on the breakdown of the race in this community, or gender, or anything else, or age, that there might be some sort of bias, and this allowed us to look at that. That's what
Yeah,
I'm saying.
the goal is a focus on equity in areas of need. So I know one thing that we had talked about is, with last year's data, is the number of stops for vehicle equipment. But it doesn't honestly look as high as it did. So I don't find that to be something we need to further look into this year.
Yeah.
I guess there are a couple communities in the state who use a system where you can see a map with dots of the community on it, which tells you what the type of stop was and where it was
Like a
in the
heat
town.
map?
And
Okay. That's not something that we have?
The police department and I believe public safety does utilize a heat map for crime, to analyze crime, and that's part of the data that they use at Project Alliance, but not for traffic stops, no.
My point is, if most of the stops were happening in certain neighborhoods, and in those neighborhoods, a lot of people were getting stopped because their taillight wasn't working, and if they happen to be, and there were very few stops in neighborhoods that were affluent, then the location of the stops becomes very important information. And if it's not actionable data, if all it is looks good, then we shouldn't spend a lot of time on it. Put it in the packet, let people look at it. If they have a question, if they see an outlier, let's talk about it. Otherwise, I don't think it's a really effective use of our time.
Well, and I guess because this was requested by a member of the Select Board, I wanted to make sure that we ran through it in the same effort and observation that we did before, because we did not have driver's race in here. But that's why I said there was nothing surprising. Because the police department does not have its own analyst, and because there's a limited amount of time that in terms of the granularity of the data about where it stopped, and because we don't have where people live in the state data, the two, it doesn't help us inform our need, right? And so what we were, in particular when we added race, what we thought we might see was that there would be more moving violation, more vehicle equipment, maybe even more investigatory for the BIPOC population, but there didn't seem to be. So that was important for us to look at.
Let's.
Oh yeah, no, unless there's other questions.
Good, but let's not spend a lot of time on it if it's not useful.
We're done, I think, unless there's questions. Yes, Clark.
I have a question in terms of expectations. That's the term I just heard. Wow. Do we have any historical evidence that we should have expected something other than what we found?
I think that my understanding is that this is the first year that, because CPARP started in 22, right? This is 23 data. So CPARP had only been around in terms of the community policing model that the police department and our advisory review capacity, this is the first year that we've really had the data to look at.
I asked that question because having moved here or gotten involved with this entire CPARP issue at the height of what I saw a lot of community angst over racial issues, I'm just looking for, even back then, a document trail.
Clark, I think it's based on the review from the, I'm not going to remember the name.
Right, that International Police Commission.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying, but, they made
and
that
also
accusation.
reports and lawsuits.
Right, I understand all that, but I'm looking for, or what I was hoping to see, or that we'd have access to, is actual hard data, not anecdotal or assumptions.
This is hard data.
No, I understand, that's what I'm saying. This is hard data.
Yeah.
And that's why I was saying, and I've heard from a couple of people talk about, well, this is what we expected. Well, the question is, what was the basis of that expectation?
Right.
And then that's why I'd like to know about previous data other than anecdotal.
I think there was data on traffic stops, but I don't know, I can't speak on it right now, but I do think in part of that review that they had made suggestions around traffic stops because they had reviewed data. I can look back at the report and try to be more, but I think there was something in that.
Well, I think what would be helpful in the information you report here, that International Police Chief Association report, if we, or you, the group, could access that data, said, historically, this is what is going on in Bennington. Here's where we're at today.
Sure.
Because, correct me if I'm mistaken, one of the goals of this organization is to, in fact, instill a sense of confidence in the public in the even-handedness of the Bennington Police Department. So if we can look back, out of the clear. 5 years ago, Bennington was doing this, this, and this. Here's what they're doing now. And here's the result. We see a decrease or an increase in certain trends. And I think these numbers they're fine, but I think they have greater validity if you had some historical data for comparison. And if we made or took a course of action predicated on a report from another organization, I think it's important that we be able to show where we started and where we are today.
Agreed.
No, I think that's, did you want to make a comment? Okay.
I was just going to say, and I think you kind of hit on, I think the trend would be good, but also just for me to look at data, I would, in my estimation, I analyze it against what the makeup of the town is, and I would expect that this would be similar. So that was what it didn't even have anything to do with historical so much, although that would be interesting. Mine was just, if I were to take a cross-section of the town, what would you expect to see? And is this close to that? And the missing bit that Kate kind of talked about, I think, was we don't know how many people are from out of town. You know, are a good chunk of the traffic stops on 279 people going to ski areas? So that makes it a little harder, but that was kind of my thought on comparing.
Right. Well, even the idea of the percentage-wise on historical or population data, if you look at this, you don't have something to use a frame of reference.
Yep.
You know, I don't know about you guys, but I'm one of the world's worst mathematicians, even with calculators. So somebody looking at it said, oh, gee, they pulled over 94 black people, but here they only pulled over 45. So if you say Bennington's percentage is this, boom, boom, boom. And if we're going to use, you know, ethnicity, racial breakdowns to compare here in the town, I think in terms of public confidence in what we're saying and doing would be better served if people had something that was easily digestible versus saying, well, take out your calculator and run these numbers.
Yeah, and I think that we all agree with that. It's just whether or not we have the capacity to do that analysis.
Right. I understand that. Well, my concern is what people see. You know, we all are victims of what people's perceptions are. So I think the best thing as the town, government, and government entities is to present data in an easily understandable and clear manner. If you leave it up to people to just take raw data and extrapolate what that means in the context of historical data or historical assumptions that led to this organization being formed, I think we stay in a gray zone. I think we have to show, in my mind, that in fact where we're at, where we were, where we're at, and where we're going. And I think that's the most important thing. And I know it's only 1 year's number, but if we had some basis of this report they mentioned earlier, even if you just have it as an annex, you know, historically, this is what people have felt or reported has gone on in the town. Well, here's where we're at today. So we can look up
So
and say,
would
we're
you
no
like us
longer
to
there.
preface our discussion of the data with those?
Well, as I said, I think the most important thing we can do in terms of building bridges and communication with the community is to show them maybe what they heard was in fact incorrect, or if they heard was correct, but we as a town
Looked
have
at the
made
data.
efforts and we're correcting that. And I think people would be more accepting and appreciative of our efforts if they could look and say, oh my God, they were doing 100 times last year, now they're only doing it 50 times.
Yeah.
So 50 times, maybe 50 times too many, but it's still better than 100. And I think that's the most important part of all the data that we're going to provide, or that you are going to provide the town people, is trends and documentation that things are in fact working or not working.
Yeah, I think the trends would be helpful because if you just have one data set, I think it could happen where you are selective in what you're picking from that data to tell one story or another.
Right. Well, that was my
It's
concern.
open to that interpretation.
You know, that was my concern when I got involved with the formation of CPARB. There was a lot of subjective commentary, a lot of emotion, and preconceived notions. And sure, that organization did this research, but I didn't see those numbers, but in the perfect world, I think I'd like to have seen an assessment like this by that organization. And I've understood from the things I've read, a lot of it was, we understand it's more attitudinal and subjective on the part of the officers or how the officers present themselves versus hard, fast numbers where, you know, you get 2% population, you get that 13% of your traffic stops are that 2%. You know, I don't think anything like that was ever presented to the public. They just heard all these terrible things like, oh, they wrote a $2 million check. They must be terrible racist. So I think that for the sake of the community and the that's the validity, credibility of this organization, CPARB, we need to see those trends. We need to show people where we started and where we're at.
Certainly
stop
we
there.
can, that's fine. Thank you for that, because I think you raised a really important point. And certainly we can do that in this next year's analysis. We can have a comparison of 23 to 24, because that would also indicate or suggest change on the department's practices, because just given when they fully have implemented, because they continue to implement community policing practices. So, but that would give us a better sense of the direction of that.
And Kate, I think, and I should have probably looked at this closer, but I do think that the vehicle equipment stops are lower.
I'm sorry?
So the last time we reviewed data last year for the traffic stops, I remember having a conversation about the vehicle equipment and the talk around poverty and pieces like that. And we had conversations with Chief Doucette as well. And I feel, and I wish that I had taken the time now actually to compare them, but I feel like that has gone down. And I mean, I have theories about maybe why, but I think that might be interesting in comparing, because we do have data there, and there was a conversation about community policing and, you know, do you issue a warning or do you issue a ticket? Do you refer to programs? So that is one area that we might be able to actually see some difference in. Yeah.
On that note, as I recall, I've read and heard of several nationwide issues surrounding, you know, equipment stops. And I'm sure there are areas in town, there are a lot of very nice high-end cars that are very well maintained, and I see them zipping through my neighborhood. And they are as guilty of whatever as loud beater rusted up pickup truck that also goes through my neighborhood. So, yeah, I think that may be an issue, but I would really like to see, when you talk about equipment, what is it? Got a headlight out, got a faulty muffler, you know, cracked windshield.
You know, it's not in the data.
Correct, I understand that. I'm just saying, but if you could, it's kind of hard to say, this guy's windshield's cracked. You can't really dispute a cracked windshield.
I agree. It's like we wanted to know the residents on the driver's license, but because the state doesn't collect it, it's not registered anywhere except in the state database. The same thing with, because I think that was one of the things that we tried to probe from what, as you said, you know, Lindsay, we were looking for need, and it's been so difficult for us that's why we started doing the listening sessions to try to probe for need, because we weren't being able to find it in the numbers, in the data, the national, well, we can't get national or state level, but in Vermont, we just don't have that level of granularity. It's like we know where they were stopped, the address where they were stopped at, because that's in the state data, but not whether that person is even a resident of Vermont, let alone Bennington. So it's the challenges of the data right now, but certainly we can do this analysis, we will do this analysis again for 2024, and that may give us some sense of change or trend. But I think this is something for continuous conversation, continued as we try to figure out how to access that information, even if it is through listening sessions, because we've had 8 already. We've already got 2 set up for this year, but it may be very possible for us to set up more for the fall. Summer's a really hard time to get people together for something like this, but it's still possible. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Any other comment?
I have a question. Is traffic safety data the only data that gets looked at and reviewed, or does calls, call response time to various locations for equitability?
Because that's not reported in any database. Now, maybe once there's an analyst on board at the police department, someone will record that, but there's no central collection that daily, monthly, hourly, that has been available to us, that we even know exists. So, I mean, what happens in a larger community with a lot more resources, maybe one thing, but this is where we are, and so we live with it. But we also analyze the town data around need and around safety that they have in the town survey. So we presented that as well this past year. So, anything else? Yes, Tortoise.
In the interest of history, I got thinking about the IACP report, which the Select Board got in April of 2020, and whether or not, in addition to looking to that and seeing how you are from that point, whether there might even have been some raw data that they used that in preparing the report that you might have access to.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll have to find out. Okay, anything else on the traffic safety data? Okay, then we're going to move on to an update on the Public Education Forum on sentencing. And there's been really no change. I have not, because Kelly was spearheading, as should be, contacting individual agencies and organizations for this. So no one's been involved except me as a CC, because it is so far away. But we wanted to make sure that we were able to get the Public Defender's Office, certainly the member of the legislature who is on the Senate Committee on Joint Legislative Justice Oversight Committee, and Center for Restorative Justice, Turning Point. We still have, we're still trying to confirm probation and parole and United Counseling Services, because they all are involved, not just in the court order for the sentencing, but in the implementation of the sentencing. Because very often the court order includes either a restorative justice panel, community panel, or counseling or substance misuse in that. So, and I wondered, we have not really created questions that we want to ask specifically. And because we meet only every other month, we've got some issues here in terms of goals, current and best practices, opportunities and challenging, and also challenges, and also just to what level do we have the completion of the court orders, and how often is sentencing successful? Our last forum underlined the fact that we have a revolving door, particularly with adolescents who live outside of Vermont, because we have no place to incarcerate them in Vermont. We have no youth facility. And so that was raised, and that these the kids, go back to their home with their parent, in the custody of their parent, and then we see them maybe less than a month later, and they're reoffending.
Kate, to that point, would we want to include Kyle Hoover from DCF to kind of speak on that capacity?
Well, the challenge is, who do we disinvite or who do we let go?
Oh, yeah. Well, if probation and parole or United Counseling doesn't come through, that is someone you could fill in there.
Yeah. I think that's a great suggestion. The challenge for us is time. We don't want to keep people past the 8 o'clock if we can help it.
Yeah.
And last time we ran over.
But I think that is something that is a topic that keeps coming up. And if we're going to talk about juveniles, I think that it would be important to have someone to speak to that.
Okay.
And I don't know who else would speak to that.
Yeah, no, I don't either. So, okay.
I'm struggling to understand why this is something that this board should be involved with.
So part of our charge is to help the community understand the police and have more confidence in public safety and the police's ability to do that. And in our lessoning sessions, what we had heard over and over is that the police are just letting people go. The police are just letting people go, which led us to have a public safety educational forum where we had a panel that discussed trends and data showing that crime had gone down. And out of that came the question, then why do we keep seeing people who we know just committed a crime on the street? And so the suggestion from the panel members was, well, you need to ask different people that question because it is a sentencing issue. So from the community members that attended that forum and the panelists, there was a request to do a sentencing forum to give the community information on how that works, because there is some confusion about who is responsible for that. And if we're supposed to be the liaison between the community and the police, and there's a confusion about their role and their job, I think that is how this kind of fits that, in my opinion.
The resolution says that we are supposed to work with the police on policies and procedures.
That is one of the things in the resolution, yes.
Actually, the resolution says to promote learning on community safety and equity issues. That's one of the goals. So that we take that to promote the learning. That's where our forums have been focused on, is to inform the community on current practices. And because we don't advocate for any legislation, if a member of the community wants to advocate, that's them or an individual member, but we don't advocate, but we do educate. And so that's why was why we thought of the forum was the best way to get that information out to people.
I think it's a noble goal to have the public understand how it is that it appears as if repeat offenders keep being released. I understand that. I'm just not sure I understand or agree that it is our job to be the people to deal with that.
Understood. How should we go about promoting learning on community safety and equity issues, in your opinion, then?
By doing outreach and by listening, not by setting up a forum where we invite people in to talk to the public about whatever their objectives are. I think we should be looking at what the public's perception is of the police and finding ways to address that, that gap in understanding.
This did come from the public's perception of the police not doing their job, and so therefore the community suggested and requested at the last forum we had that we put a forum together.
Is that something that's come up in listening sessions, that the police aren't doing their job?
Yeah.
That they don't think they're being effective, not necessarily doing their job, but not being effective.
So I think it would make sense for us to work with the police to find ways to along with the police, respond to that perception.
And the conversation has been, the perception is that they're not being effective because they are seeing people re-released, and the police do not have control over that. So therefore, you have to frame that to the community, because not everyone understands the criminal justice system and how it works. That a police officer might arrest you, but they're not the person who picks up charges on you. And then the person that presses charges on you is not the same person that sentences you. So that is kind of where this came from. And it did come from the community and from those listening sessions and from the forum. So it did come from listening, and it is to try to clarify the role of the police, because, as Clark said, there is a perception that our police department is not doing all they can. And so from looking at data, crime data, listening to the amount of training that our police officers are sometimes voluntarily participating in, we just wanted a way to reflect actual fact and data instead of subjective narratives.
We don't have the crime data.
We do have crime data.
Well, we just had a long discussion about how what we have is traffic data.
We have traffic data right now, but if you are interested in crime data for the state or Bennington County, it does exist. It's not specific to BPD, though.
Then I think if that's the case, then maybe we ought to be trying to pursue having more crime data.
Agreed.
And using that as an educational tool rather than having a debate about criminal justice reform or sentencing reform.
We're not talking about
debating
reform.
about that.
We're talking about current practices. As I said, we don't advocate for anything in terms of reforming that. We just want to make sure that between the listening sessions and the information that we gather from the educational forum, because people are able to ask questions, and each of the panelists provide information on their role in that system. So it informs or tries to make understandable how complex that system is, and that each party has got a role in that. And the left hand might not be on the same place, in the same place as the right hand, and or know even for sure what they're doing. Because sometimes we learned in the safety issues that were presented at the last forum, we discovered that very often the federal government comes in, and the local case that may have been moved up to the state level has now been taken over at the federal level, and what was requested in terms of sentencing at the local and state level is now overwhelmed by what the feds want. So it's a mess. Well, that's my opinion. It's a mess. I think sometimes it's a real mess, but that's just my opinion. And all we're trying to do is make sure the community is informed about that complexity. If they want to advocate it, I say they are, in terms of that reform, go for it. But we just want to make sure people have accurate information. And so this is just part of the toolbox. If you have another way, or if you think of another way, another opportunity to inform and educate the community, we're open to listening to that and to figuring out how we can do it, okay? But as I mentioned, in terms of the data analysis, there's only so much capacity each of us has to look, search, and analyze that. And at this point, this is really where we are. So we're really open to suggestions on what we could add to that toolbox, because I think it's important that we keep addressing that issue of education and listening, hearing what the community has to say. So, thank you. Anything else, though? Jesse, did you have? No? Okay.
Could I just add to that? One of the,
Sure.
I kind of am following the same thought process with Lydia, but I also, from my experience as a select board member and a concerned member of the community prior to that, It's a matter of education. I got gray hair. I remember when we actually used to have civics and government classes in school, and people taught you how the government works. You didn't sit in front of YouTube and see people get investigated, tried, convicted, and sentenced and dealt with in 45 minutes. So I think within our society, there's a large amount of ignorance and just people not aware of the system, how the system actually works. I think, and one of my conversations I actually had with our state prosecutor, personally, I think that they and the judiciary have an obligation to the people of this state to be informing them how and why things are working. You and I, with the best of intentions, this commission, the select board, we're really not in a position to speak for the judiciary and the correctional system in the state of Vermont. Joe next door telling their neighbor his second and third hand story carries more weight than anybody in this room will ever carry down on Pleasant Street. That's just the way it is. But what we can't do, in my mind, or what I think you guys shouldn't do, forgive me if I keep involving myself, I think the most important thing to not do is get wrapped around the axle in trying to clear out everybody's cobwebs. We have to look at the big picture. The big picture is, in my opinion, the community had very serious concerns about their relationship with the Bennington Police Department. And what the plan or the goal is to reassure the community that the police department are operating in their best interest, using the best practices in law enforcement and the best practices in addressing social issues that are impacted by law enforcement. The governmental process for the state of Vermont or the state of the United States of America, we can't fix that. No. We can't solve that in people's minds. So I really would hope that we can stay focused on just that, our little piece of the pie, letting people know that we are working for them, with the police, for them. And I think that's one of some of the questions I ask is, hey, where are we at? Where were we at, and where are we now? And what direction are we going? I think that's what people want to hear. Sure. The fact they see, and I'm right in this room aware that a wave of criminality we dealt with 2 years ago is nowhere near what is happening in our town today. Do we still have criminality? Yes. But things have clearly gotten better, and I think we need to focus on the process. The process is moving forward. And I think that, we can always look back and say how bad things were. How about how good things are now and how good we want them to be tomorrow?
And this also came out of some commentary, I believe it was at the select board, about crime and some complaints about crime. And also there were some issues with vigilantism. So at that point in time, it was a community safety issue to educate the public on actual crime rates, because it was not common knowledge that our crime rate had gone down. We were still living in that reality of 2020, 2021. Correct. So that was part of the goal of those two, and out of it came the request to do something around sentencing. And I think if our community requests something, that we should honor that.
Right. No, I'm not saying we should.
No, I'm agreeing with you, Clark. I'm agreeing with you. Yeah.
And the real big picture, and what I've been saying to people, they need to sit down and talk to Mr. Baumgart's, Mr. Pomerantz, because they're the ones who have to approve reappointment of judges and the approval of judges being appointed in the first place. So I have been encouraging people, the Bennington Police Department, I think, are fine folks who do the best they can with the tools given to them. But I think, we can't sort of piggyback what's happening in Montpelier or the whole state on their shoulders. Sure. And to some extent by, trying to roll in these people against me. Hoping to give you direction, rolling in these other issues may in fact be clouding the water. People look at, oh my God, we're talking, but nothing's happening.
I think it could be, but I think it also, the two things are not mutually exclusive. And so it's very hard to separate them, especially if people don't understand the different roles that the two things play. So while I agree that we should, definitely focus on what's happening here, sometimes we know the larger state's going to affect our community, so.
Right, again, that's, I don't know if you saw our select board meeting yesterday where we had all the people here about the monument. We brought in people, the stakeholders, and said, here, this is the problem, we all have to work together to fix this. But, we didn't say this department is the nidus of the problem. It's the whole thing, and I hope that this committee can work to educate and motivate people to stop. Mr. Baumgart's or our state reps on the street say, hey, Joe Blow, I saw him arrested 7 times last year. What's going on with the state laws that this guy can wreak havoc on our town?
And we have control over the questions that are posed during the forum too. So, right?
Yeah.
So we have,
Which is why I was asking for suggestions about those.
more focused.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, my focus has been as a select board member, people stop me all the time about crime, and I say, we don't write the laws here on the select board. Our little town ordinance we do, but the things that are of people's concern, and I say time and time again, you gotta at least stop Mike or Tim or whatever when you catch them at the grocery store and give them a piece of your mind about these issues and ask them to take action. And, the most important thing, and I think we can, as a group of concerned citizens, is educate and motivate our peers to get involved, ask questions, and just don't accept platitudes. And so much of, I think, why we're in this situation is when I moved to town and I heard all this terrible stuff about this racist, out of control police department, I said, whoa, 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 whoa. I got to get in on this. What's going on? Educate me. And of course, the more you see, the more you learn that there's a lot of emotion surrounding what we do here, that a lot of these views are thoroughly subjective and emotion-based and agenda-driven. So I think like, Lydia was saying, we got to kind of stay in our lane, because I think broadening up too much, I think actually can have some ill effect, so to speak, on what we're doing. But I'll step back. Excuse me.
It's okay, because I think this discussion then has brought really, in my mind, 2 items at least for our next agenda. So it's a nice segue. The first is to think about additions to that menu of activities. What else can we do? Right now, we only have 2. We have listening sessions and we have the forum. So what else can we do to get the word out and to communicate and educate and do all that stuff that we say we want to do? So what else can we do? And that's for next month's agenda.
Are we talking about the agenda now? Have we
Yeah,
moved
we've
on to
moved
that
on
item?
to upcoming agenda items.
I have something on that.
Okay.
If I may.
The second item that I'd like to see on is something that we've had in the past. There's been different programs that the police department have initiated, like, for example, the one with the landlords, where the police department has met with Chief Doucette and Cam primarily, but I think other officers have met with groups of landlords to inform them about what's happening with their residents when there's been multiple calls in terms of drugs or violence or just complaints from the community about noise, et cetera, and to allow, or not allow, but assist the landlords in maintaining safe spaces and good relations with the community. So those are 2. Lydia, you said you had an item for
Yes.
the agenda.
One of the policies that we have is our fair and impartial policing policy. Our fair and impartial policing policy was last revised in 2021. In April of 2024, the Criminal Justice Council enacted a new revised model fair and impartial policing policy, which we and all other agencies of law enforcement are required by law to implement. So 14 months after the fact, we have yet to implement that revised model policy. And it's important because it talks a lot about the interface between our police department and Homeland Security or federal agencies. It talks about what our police are authorized or required to do in the way of cooperation. It also talks about what they are not required to do in the way of cooperation. The revised policy spends a lot more time on this topic, and a lot has happened since April of 2024. We have a different ICE and a different Homeland Security, and we have questions about how local police should be interacting with the federal agencies. So I think it's important that we put this revised model policy on our agenda for the next meeting. In addition to requiring that we implement it or something that covers everything in it, the statute authorizes us to add to it. And so, given the fact that a lot of things have changed in the 14 months since this model was enacted by the Criminal Justice Council, we should be thinking really hard about whether there are, in fact, things that we ought to be adding to it, to strengthen it, to make it clear, and to support our police and give them clear guidelines as to how they should be enacting with federal agencies. So that's I think something that we really ought to be doing, and I think it's something that the community is very much interested in. It's not just about the immigrant community. It's about how all of us deserve to live in an environment where we don't have to worry about whether one of the speakers this evening talked about people who are wearing masks and have no identification and no badges and don't say why they're taking people off the streets. So this is an important discussion. I really think we need to be having it, and I would urge you to put it on the agenda for the next meeting.
In fact, what I'll do is I'll talk to the chief about what they're doing right now and how they're implementing this now in terms of this initiative.
They, by law, as part of their training, of every officer's training this year, they should be receiving training in accordance with this new model policy.
Right, and I can ask him to talk about the training that they're receiving and how, in other ways, that they've implemented parts of it and used it.
Yeah, we're halfway through the year. I don't know if they've received this training yet or not.
I don't know either.
But you talked earlier about some policies are every other year training. I think it's even-numbered years.
Okay. Yeah.
Gosh, I have a flyer.
So if
I don't
it
know what
was,
that means.
but they may have had it late in '24.
Well, except that they weren't required to have the new policy training until
26.
excuse me, you're right. I think I've got the odds and evens wrong. I'm pretty sure it was this year that they were supposed to be getting that training.
Okay.
But let's look at it and put it on the agenda.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Others? Additions to the agenda? No? All right. I have two announcements. Because we don't meet again until August 28th, and there's a typo on the agenda that says it's August 28th, 2028. It should be August 28th, 2025.
Mine says
You have
25.
25? Okay,
Yeah.
sorry, I must
corrected
have
it.
an old copy. I have an old copy. But National Night Out is August 5th, 2025. That is often the time where we have the backpack giveaway. And because we didn't have, the department didn't have, and those of us who volunteer for it, the bicycle rally, I don't know if they'll be included in that, so watch for further announcements, not from us, but from the Banner and other places where you get community announcements. So, anything else?
Just a clarification, I looked
Sure.
it up. The training for the fair and impartial policing policy is odd years, so that would be this year.
So that would be this year. So we'll find out if they've had it already, or if they, or when it will happen. Okay? Thank you very much for bringing that up. Okay. If there are no other additions or comments or thoughts, then I'd like a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Abstain? None? Have a wonderful evening, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.